You all for being here. And my name is Dave Pryor. This session is called No One is Coming to Save You, but what I'd like to ask you to do is channel whatever memories you have of Liam Neeson's voice, because when I think about the title of this book and we came up with it, we had been joking around, Stuart and I, about the movie Taken, when he says, I'm a man with a very particular set of skills. And that's how I hear the title of this book in Liam Neeson's voice, in this voice of desperation, that no one is coming to save you. And that's, Stuart always says it really happy and cheerful, which is, if you know Stuart, kind of the way things go. But that's what this whole talk is going to be about. What do you do when no one is coming to save you, and how do you come to grips with that? And what does it actually mean? So 2 years ago, actually 2 years ago today, Stuart and I were at a Scrum Alliance event in Amsterdam, and it was the end of the networking event, and we were very inebriated, and we were walking to karaoke, and we got to talking about Agile and how he does everything visually, and I've been doing podcasting since 2008, so for me, everything's kind of auditory. And we decided to write a book together, which, for how things go when you're out at a networking event and you've got a few in you, a lot of those things don't happen, but we actually stuck with it. And it took us about a year and a half. Halfway through the book in Agile 2024, Stuart ran a session where he collected a lot of data that we included in the book. We published it and we presented about it this past summer. So far what we've done is we've put out the book where we shared a lot of things that we've learned along the way. I'm going to share some of those with you today and show you how I come up with some of the things that I do. That's the next step for this, is with this presentation. I'm hoping that you will get a sense or an idea of how you can develop experiments that will help you work through the fact that no one is coming to save you. So this is Stuart and I this summer selling the 10 copies of the book that we had printed for the conference. If you're not familiar with Stuart Young, he's very well known in the Agile community. He's from the UK, and he does a lot of graphic facilitation at events. And all the illustrations you're going to see in this presentation are all from Stuart. He and I are very different people. We both have a lot of peculiarities. He talks a lot about the fact that he was just recently, in the last 2 years, diagnosed as having ADHD. And we've kind of grown up, each of us, and developed a lot of compensating controls for ourselves, things that help us kind of navigate different things. I'm incredibly introverted, but I make a living as an instructor, which before the pandemic meant that I was in front of a room of people almost every day, which is very taxing for somebody who's introverted. So I'd have to find ways to kind of manage myself in these situations and do whatever I could so that when I was in that room full of people, that I could really be there and be present for people. So the book is full of tips and tricks, hacks, whatever you want to call them, things that Stuart and I have road tested for years that we found make it easier for us to show up as sort of an optimized version of ourselves. Like if I'm in a room with you in a meeting, what I want to be able to do is be there and be of service to you, be of service to myself, and be truly present with what's going on. It probably would have been easy for us to just write a book about Agile, but there's so many of those on everybody's bookshelf, we figured we'd take it in a slightly different direction. A lot of the things that we introduce in the book are ways that we cope with our own vulnerabilities, or what a lot of people might think of as weaknesses. But for us, I think for both of us, where we've kind of come to with these things is they're not really, in our mind, they're not weaknesses, they're superpowers. And I think for any of you that have anything that you would consider to be a vulnerability, that's an important question, is how do you turn that thing into a superpower, whatever it is? And that's the main focus of what we're doing. So this is the book cover, which Stuart drew. That's me with the guitar and him with the pencil, trying to surf the chaos of this darkest timeline, dystopian dumpster fire work hellscape we're all living through right now. It's a very difficult time to do what we do, especially if you work in Agile, because a whole bunch of you probably don't have jobs and you can't find jobs. I mean, I sent out a bunch of resumes over the past year. I have 30 years of experience in project management, and the 2 or 3 times that I did make it through the ATS, barbed wire fence, I was told I didn't have enough project management experience, and once by a company where I taught the project managers there how to do their job. It's very frustrating. And if you do have a job, you're probably doing the job of 2 or 3 different people. And you're incredibly overloaded and overwhelmed, but you don't want to leave the job because you have a job and most people don't have a job. And so that's kind of a challenging thing. So, the book is a collection of power ups. Like I said, they've all been road tested, some of them for years and years and years. These are the things that we use every day to try to make ourselves better versions of ourselves when we get into a room with other people. Stuart's a very big champion of authenticity. And we would say it's required. I also think it's unavoidable because even when you show up and you're trying to be something other than who you actually are, that is your authentic self at that moment. That's you trying to fake it. You have to be willing for this stuff that I'm going to go through to work. You have to be willing to look at the hard things about yourself that you don't want to look at. You also have to have a growth mindset. You have to believe that change is possible for whatever it is you're working on. I'm going to show you a bunch of different kinds of things you can try to tune up about yourself and about how you show up in a room with other people. You need to have a boundless sense of curiosity as well, because that to me is one of the most important parts about this is as I talk through it, whatever's going on, there's some way to make it better. There's something I can try, even if it's just to learn more about what's actually happening. So in the book, we have some sort of foundational beliefs that we think are really important. The first one is you are a system. Even if you don't think of yourself as a system, you are. You're a system that produces work. So taking this systems thinking approach to kind of how you do the things that you do, right? You interact with other systems all the time. You're responsible for constantly working on improving that system. You may not know how, but it is part of your job. And nobody's going to come and improve that system for you. So you have to take ownership. A lot of my way of thinking about this stuff is based on Christopher Avery's responsibility process. I want to be responsible for the things that I do, and I want to find a way to own them. And I am my authentic self, good or bad, no matter how I show up. That's what I have to bring to the table that day. A big part of what we talk about in the book, and I think a big part of work for any agilist or anybody who practices any lean ways of working, is visualizing the work. That's really, really critical. You have to get the work out of your head and into a place where you can look at it. Because if you can't see it, you can't understand it. If you can't understand it, you can't fix it. Resilience is becoming a much bigger part of the conversation that we all have every day with work. And it was Trisha Broderick's keynote at the Agile conference this summer. It's the theme of the Agile Network event that's going on right now. Resilience being not that you don't fall down, but that you find a way to get back up. You find a way to put yourself back together and keep going until you've come up with some better solution than you have right now. And I would say overall, each of us has just one single job, one thing that we have to do. And every single day, you have to suck less than you did yesterday. That's really, really important. Okay. So, I would like you to repeat after me. If you want to unmute for a second, you're all welcome to do it. I will pull up the text, and if you're willing to call these out, I would be really grateful. So the first thing I want to ask you to say, only 3 things. No one is coming to save me.
No one is coming to save me.
Awesome. No one is going to fix my world.
No one is going to fix my world.
This is 100% my job.
That is 100% my job.
All right. Thank you.
I will not repeat things other people say.
I didn't know if anybody was going to do that or not. So that's awesome. Thank you for doing that. That is kind of how I look at everything. So there's this Jocko Willenick thing, and I'm not a Jocko Willenick guy, but he talks about how his response to everything is like, good. Like you got your leg cut off in a thresher. Good. Because whatever happens is supposed to teach you to rise up and face that challenge. And I think that whatever I try to remind myself of that all the time. Like whatever thing I'm feeling like the victim of, right? Okay, I can be a victim or I can try to do something about it. And I choose, whenever I have the resources, to try to do something about it. But it does require that I make a conscious choice to do that. Okay. Center to everything in our book is emotional intelligence. That is kind of the core of our universe. And, you know, I referred to it a few minutes ago as the darkest timeline. We are living in the darkest timeline right now. And we're heading towards this magical, wondrous land where artificial intelligence is going to give us all jetpacks and brush our teeth for us. And it's going to be just like the Jetsons, only better. When we get to that world, or when we're plugged in like Neo into the battery pack that fuels the overall controlling system, it's emotional intelligence that's going to make you stand out and thrive. Everybody's going to have their agents and their bots and their co-pilots and whatever else, but it's going to be your ability to learn more and deepen your skills with emotional intelligence. That's what's going to make you kind of rise above all that. In Daniel Goleman's reference to emotional intelligence, he talks about 4 different kind of core ideas. So we have self-awareness, self-regulation, social awareness, and relationship management. I'm going to focus mostly on self-awareness and self-regulation. And that is kind of those, to me, those 2 things feed the other 2. Like you can't get to social awareness or relationship management without the first 2. So a big part of this way of working is about deepening your self-awareness. And you have to be willing to take a look at yourself and really pay attention to that, right? You know, why is that worth doing? It's a lot easier for me to be like, oh, well, Chris is obviously the problem, you know, and just point to Chris and explain, well, all Chris is doing everything wrong. But how many of us stop and take the time to look at ourselves and think, well, what if we're the bad guy in the story, right? I'm sure if you asked Darth Vader, he would tell you he was the hero. But for somebody, you're the villain, right? In many, many ways, you are the thing that is blocking you from whatever it is you're trying to do. And we spend so much time working with teams and companies and organizations and trying to help them figure out how to adopt Agile or be more Agile or do whatever. We never stop to take the time. I've only known one company where they started out this way, where that transformation engagement starts with the most fundamental system of work, which is the self. Right? There's one company I know where before they put anybody on a Scrum team, they teach them all personal kanban. Because the idea is that what we do is we try to instill a sense of personal agility before they move on to functioning as a team. Most of us, I mean, I spent most of my career start at the team level, but we never bother to talk to people about doing it on their own. So it's kind of like skipping a whole bunch of grades, I think, and skipping some of the fundamental things you need to be able to learn enough to be able to improve this. So for me, the test harness is personal kanban. So my background with personal kanban is I wanted to learn about kanban, but I didn't have a project I could work on. Personal kanban was the closest thing I could find. So if you're not familiar with it, it was created by Jim Benson and Tony Ann DiMaria. It's a really simple way of managing the work that you have to do every day. It borrows practices from Kanban or Kanban, if I was saying it right. And it only has 2 rules: visualize your work and limit your work in process. And that's it. There's an implied 3rd rule, which for me, I try to always make a point of stating very loudly, which is you have to learn. When I first started to work with personal Kanban, it was because I'd been trying to do getting things done, and I couldn't. I tried to read David Allen's book like 5 times. I couldn't finish the book. I would create a task list, and within a couple of weeks, I was just changing the due dates every night to all the tasks. They'd slip into the next day. I mean, I don't know how many of you have done that, but I'm guessing a bunch of you do that. Spend an hour a day shifting the due date till tomorrow. And it wasn't really working for me. And when I started to do personal Kanban, I had a board, and I would move things across the board. And I think that is the way a lot of people get started with it, right? It's just like we do with the Scrum team, right? You've got all the Post-its on the wall or in Trello or whatever. You're moving them, and it's a way of maybe convincing yourself you're making progress, maybe tracking all the things you have to do. And I think a lot of people stop there. Like they just go through the motions, and that helps, and then eventually they abandon their board. And maybe they start over or they try some other method. And okay, I mean, that kind of does a job. But I took a class at Modus Institute, which is the company that Jim Benson and Tony and DeMaria run. And there was another student who has a post-it on the wall. And whenever you're on a call with Jeff, behind your head, there's this post-it that says that, "Dear Kanban, how are you lying to me today?" And I felt like somebody hit me in the head with a shovel because I actually was already at a point where I was sitting down at the end of each week with the board, looking at the board, having this kind of mental conversation with it. Like, why are you still there? That you card that's been there for 4 weeks. Why have you not moved? And the card's basically looking back at me going, "'Cause you suck. You haven't done anything with me. That's why I'm still here." And so I'm wondering, like, well, why? Why does that happen? Why am I blowing my whip limit, right? All the stuff that we're supposed to do at the team level, I was actually trying to do that on a, weekly, sometimes daily basis. And I think if you've got any kind of productivity system, you visualize your work however you want. You don't use personal Kanban. That's cool. It doesn't matter. But you have to have some way of looking at that work and sitting down with it and interrogating your board. Right? Why is stuff sitting there? Why hasn't it been updated? And it's not good or bad. It's just there's stuff that happened. Okay. Is that good stuff or bad stuff? Right? For me, the card that I have on my board says, "Dear Kanban, what are you screaming at me that I'm refusing to hear?" Because when I look at that board, I mean, it's literally like grabbing me and shaking me, and I'm like just pretending that's not happening. Which I'm sure a bunch of you have boards like that, where it's just full of stuff you're never going to do that you're afraid to get rid of. Or if you're like me, I have like an archive of Trello boards, where I try to use Trello and it gets to a point where I'm like, I can't. It's just too much. And I just start a new one. Because I can't be bothered to clean it up and I just can't deal with all the mess that's in there. It's too overwhelming for me to look at. So that's kind of what everything we're about to go through is grounded in. Now, I mentioned that when I wanted to learn about Kanban, I couldn't find a Kanban project. I was doing consulting work, and all of it was either Scrum or traditional project management. So I was working at a company called Big Visible at the time, and I decided I was going to try personal Kanban, and I asked a guy named Brian Bizzuto to be my coach. And Boz is a really great guy, but he was a little annoyed with my question. He's like, "Well, you're an Agile coach, dude. Why do you need me to coach you in personal Kanban?" I was like, "Because I'm going to cheat. And I need somebody who's going to call me out when I cheat." And he agreed to do it provided that I do this super weird thing. He had me sign up for this system called Track Your Happiness, which is an app. Technically, you can still sign up for it, although it doesn't seem to function anymore. And it was really weird. So I signed up for it, and all day long on my phone, I get these things that would pop up. "What are you doing right now? Would you like to skip ahead and do something else?" And that list of activities that says, "What are you doing?" actually had an item that said, "Making love." Like, I don't know who's going to stop doing that to respond to their phone. That seemed a little weird to me. And it was very invasive, and it would ask you, like, would you skip ahead? Where are you? Do you like where you are? What's your anxiety level? Like, all these just random questions. And then you'd get these reports. And so while I was doing it for the first 2 weeks, I thought that was just about the dumbest thing I'd ever done. Total waste of time. Until I got to the end, and Boz and I got on a call and looked at the work, and I realized something that was really, really incredible. I am a person who plans around work. So when I would start a day, I'd make a list of all the stuff I have to do. And I would always include the things that were like the self-maintenance stuff, right? Like for me, there's certain things that I need. If I do most of these every day, I'm gonna be okay. I have to exercise, I have to meditate, I have to play guitar, listen to music, read for fun. If I can do at least 3 of those a day, I'm gonna be okay. If not, I'm gonna be an unbearable bastard to everyone around me. But I would always leave that stuff until I finished all my work, which when I was, traveling around training all the time, they would be like 11:30, 12 o'clock, and I'd be like, all right, I can play guitar now, but I got to get up in 6 hours to go teach again. And most of the time I wouldn't do that stuff, or if I did, I'd only get like 3 hours of sleep, which will wreck me for the next day. Using this app showed me that. It had like a visual explanation of this is how the things you're getting done and how you're planning out your days. And I realized that all the stuff that was like taking care of the system stuff, I was just not getting to do. So it would be like if you had a car and you kept saying, well, I'll change the oil next week, next week, next week, next week. At some point, the car just stops running. To run an experiment, my first real experiment with this, I started to try to intersperse some of those activities throughout the course of the day. The biggest part of everything that I'm kind of going through here is the study and plan, do, study, adjust. Because it really does require that you sit down and take the time. You make the time and protect the time to interrogate your work, to understand more about it. And I blogged the whole thing, and some of it's pretty ridiculous, but this was a pretty profound change for me. What I found was that by mixing in that self-maintenance stuff throughout the course of the day, I was able to work longer and be more available to people and do more stuff. I mean, I'm a pretty hyper productive person, but this kind of amplified that. And that was the beginning of me kind of running these types of experiments. So just testing different things out. Just one word of caution before we go further down this path. Sometimes when you run these experiments, they're going to show you stuff you don't want to see about yourself. But that's part of it too, like part of a growth mindset. You have to be open to the things that are hard to look at, right? I want to be able to optimize myself so that I can be of the best possible service to the people around me, the people I care about, which includes the people I work with. My friend in New Smalley would remind me that you have to put on your own oxygen mask first. So I should say, be of service to myself and those around me. And a really big part of that is deepening my emotional intelligence because self-regulation is a big part of it. Okay. Now, kind of a side note, one of the books that has most deeply impacted my life, probably the book that has most deeply impacted my life, is The Art of War. I'm a huge fan of The Art of War. I think I have about 40 different translations of it on my bookshelf. Teach a course in it. Been using it since high school. Other people use the Bible to solve the problems. I use The Art of War. And there's a line from The Art of War, which I'm taking a little bit out of context, but the line is, if you know your opponent and yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. And that's a really important kind of concept to what I'm talking about today, is that you have to understand yourself as deeply as you can. Your opponent is inertia, or just not making progress, or being stuck, or that self-imposed victimhood. The people that walk around going, oh, they're making me do this at work. They're not making you do anything. You have a job, you show up every day, you're choosing to do that, right? You have to breathe oxygen, you have to drink water, you have to go to the bathroom once in a while and eat some food, but that's it. The rest of it's all optional. You sign up for that. So if you accept that you've signed up for it, if you take responsibility and ownership for that, then what can you do with it, right? And that's where we get into this whole thing about studying the system. So I'm going to walk through 3 different kinds of experiments or things I tried to learn that are all centered around the same idea or kind of tied together. I'm going to talk about tracking the done, finding the animal, and tracking the weight of work. So with tracking the done, one of the things that happens for a lot of people when they're doing something like personal kanban is you have a board. So I had a board like this, and I'm going to stop the presenter mode for a second, because what I would do, I finished a task, I would ask myself, how did I feel about that? And some things brought me joy. Some things I was kind of like, taking out the garbage is kind of, It's not a bad thing, but it's not a good thing. There's things that I hate. The cat litter definitely brings misery. And there's things that they're not meh and they're not misery. They're just kind of like the absence of any joy whatsoever. Right. So I just started to put cards into those columns. And what happened was I'd get to the end of the time box, a week or whatever, and I would take all the cards off the wall and I'd group them. And then I would look at them and try to see what that was telling me. Like, what kind of activities go in the unjoy column? The kinds of activities for me that tend to go in there are things that I'm doing for other people that add no value for me, no value for the customers I'm working for. They only add value for the person I'm doing stuff for, right? And so then the question becomes, well, what can I do to reduce that? Do I need to reduce it? Is there some larger reason why I'm doing that? What are the things that bring me joy? How can I get more of that? Or how can I, spread more of that throughout the day? And that will teach you, that the things that bring you joy might not be the things that you thought bring you joy. When I did that first thing with Brian Bizzuto, one of the things I learned was I overplan every day. I mean, I still do that. That hasn't stopped. But I used to walk around feeling like, oh my God, I have to edit this podcast, and then I have to go do this, and I have to do that. And when I looked at this, one of the things that occurred to me was, you know what? Everything on my board that I have to do, if I had a day off, or almost all of it, and you were like, hey, would you like to interview Esther Derby today? I'd be like, yes, that would be awesome. I would love to interview Esther anytime, right? So a lot of the things that I was walking around feeling like were a burden, they weren't actually a burden. It was just my mindset. So understanding the way you feel about the work that you're doing can maybe help you reframe the way you're thinking about it and realize, you know what, this is not so bad. Or maybe help you get to a place where you're starting to question, why do I have so much of these things that I hate on my plate every day? What can I do to alleviate that, right? How can I find either some reason why those would be good to do, or how can I give them to somebody else? I don't think, I don't know, most people don't spend time thinking about that. Right? And that is sort of the beginning of this for me, is understanding what my work means to me. What value does it bring to me? If I can look at all the things I'm trying to do and think about the things that are bringing me joy or misery or whatever, then I can kind of stage them throughout the course of the day, right? And look at the activities in a way that tries to propel me forward. One of my prioritization techniques is called cat litter first, where I take all the things I have to do and I prioritize them. So the thing at the top is the thing I don't want to do the most, usually changing the cat litter. Because everything I do pushes me to the next thing, because the next thing is going to suck less than the thing I'm doing right now. So you can start to think about how you orient your work so that it fuels you and pushes you forward. And that was a pretty big learning for me there. Another one about finding your animal. There's a Daniel Pink book called When. Everybody loves Drive by Daniel Pink. I would recommend When. One of the things he talks about in that book is that we all have different chronotypes. We all have different points during the day where you are kind of optimal, right? I can't see everybody. Well, let me see if I can make it so I can see everybody. If you have your camera on, raise your hand if you are one of those morning people. Yeah, you people are my nemesis. I am not a morning person. I left to my own devices. I go to bed at like 3 o'clock in the morning and I get up around 8 or 9. A friend of mine calls it Sinatra hours, right? But if you figure out what kind of chronotype you are, whether you're a lark, which is an early morning person, or an owl, or you're in the middle there, you can think about when your energy is going to peak. When are you best suited for what type of work, right? For me, the best thing for me to do in the morning is focus work that I can do on my own without interruption. The phone calls and stuff, I'm okay with that in the afternoon. This morning, I had a phone call at 7 o'clock in the morning. That means I'm going to spend the entire rest of my day trying to recover because it just hijacks everything I have to do. A bunch of you probably are familiar with the Calm meditation app. They define 4 different animal types for the way you experience your day or have your energy throughout the day. But we all have that, right? One of the most powerful things that I've learned about myself is how to schedule myself so that I am kind of optimized for each point in the day. When is the best time for me to do creative stuff? When is the best time for me to do collaborative stuff? And that's really, really empowering when you learn that about yourself. But the problem is the people you work with, they don't care. So it becomes really frustrating sometimes. The last job I had at a regular company, it took me I worked at the company for like 9 years, and it took a couple years, but I actually taught everyone in the company, don't schedule Dave for calls before 10 o'clock in the morning. Because when I started, everybody at that company, all the leadership people were all like, let's do phone calls at 6 a.m. And that didn't really work out for me. And it took a while, but I was able to make adjustments to the way that I do my work, the way that I engage with other people. And here's why that's important. If I'm on a team with a bunch of people and I can say to them, look, you know what? If you need me to be fully focused and engaged, this is the time of day I'm best at that. Then maybe we can set it up so that the me that shows up for them is the me that they need. The person I was on the phone call with at 7 o'clock in the morning, they did not get the best version of me. The best version of me does not exist at 7 o'clock in the morning. Right. So, I mean, it's not always going to work out, especially if you work with distributed teams and everybody's got time zone challenges. But having an awareness of that, at least you can make a conscious choice. Right. And if you know the work that you're trying to do, you know what's going to bring you joy or misery, you can sequence that work throughout the day. And you can also try to organize it for the time of day that you're best suited to be able to show up and do that work, as opposed to the opposite. Right. So that this is really just about deepening your awareness of yourself and how you can show up and, as I said, be of service to people. Now, another thing that was really important is tracking the done. So I did that thing where I was, figuring out if the tasks were bringing me joy or not. And that was very, very helpful to me. But then I went an additional step where I would start to think about the fact that there's some stuff on my board and there's probably some stuff on your board that's been sitting there for a long time and you're just not doing it. And you're just thinking like, I'm a bad person. I am a bad person because I did not post that podcast that we recorded. It's been sitting there ready to go for like 2 weeks and it only take me a half an hour, but I got to like a whole Twitter post and I don't want to do that. The longer something sits on your board, the more weight, cognitive weight. It's like somebody's dripping lead onto it that it may carry for you. And it just sits there kind of nagging at you. So I started to think about that. And what I did was I would mark down for anything on my board, how do I feel about it before I do it? Now, if you said, hey, Dave, we're going to have this big collaborative jamboree thing, I don't, I'd rather just work by myself. So that before I did it, I would probably be kind of a frowny face. But while I'm doing it, I realized, you know what? This is awesome. I should work this way more because it is so much better. I'm a better version of me when I do it. And afterwards, yeah, I feel pretty good about it too. But maybe I'm not like, oh, let's go do that again. Right? Recording a podcast, sometimes the anticipation of it is just the whole thing. It's somebody that I've been trying to get to interview for a really long time, and I can't wait for the conversation. And the conversation is great. And afterwards, maybe I feel good about that too. Changing the cat litter, big frowny face. While I'm doing it, I realize this isn't that bad. It takes like 5 minutes. But afterwards, like I would typically change the cat litter on a Sunday, but if I do it on a Saturday, it's like I bought myself a present. Because then when I wake up on Sunday morning, I don't have to worry about cat poop. This is a nice gift to have for yourself. So I would do this for all the activities. And that just was like one further step in terms of how can I sequence these things to make more progress, to give myself more momentum. And it all comes back to this idea of sitting down and looking at the board, looking at your work, and letting the board coach you. Because the board knows what you need to do. You just have to listen to it, right? If you can't see your work, you can't understand it. If you can't understand it, you can't fix it. As I mentioned before, sometimes these experiments teach you things you don't really want to know, maybe, or the experiments don't care about your ego. I have done experiments with my family to try to figure out how to show up as a better version of myself for my wife and daughter. And one of the things I learned was that the version of me that I thought was the best version of me was not the one they thought was the best version of me. So it's helpful to know that I can make adjustments accordingly, but it also can take some hits along the way. But it is about deepening your understanding of self. The more you understand yourself, the more you understand how to apply these practices to optimize your ability to show up, the better able you are to do that with your team and with your organization. So a lot of these things I've talked about, I didn't really go into like an experimental method. And to be honest with you, I don't have like a super formalized approach to that. I am constantly running experiments, testing different things out. There are more formalized versions of this. Quantified self. I mean, if any of you have an Apple Watch, you're kind of on the cusp of that already. You may be doing a lot of it. I do a lot of this stuff. I just had never thought of it as a big social movement that it is. This is maybe more along the lines of people that are athletes. But you can do it with sleep. I mean, I've been tracking my sleep for years because I don't sleep enough, and I know that. And I try to figure out how I can make sure I get better or more restful sleep. You might do it with your diet, if you have food allergies, if you're trying to lose weight, or if you are exercising, right? And that's great. That's awesome, right? Maybe you've got one of those rings or the Apple Watch or the other bracelet, the Within bracelet, one of those kind of tracker things. But looking at the data and trying to figure out why you're looking at it is important, because you can just get kind of drunk with data that doesn't really help. But what are you trying to figure out? What's going to help you? What question are you trying to answer? What are you going to study? How are you going to capture it? How are you going to make sense of it? And what are you going to do with that? I mean, it's the same thing we do with our teams all the time. It's just that you're applying it to the idea of yourself as the lowest level system of work. You could absolutely use one of these. I mean, you're probably familiar with a bunch of these, and there's many, many more. For me, I think they would be cool, but I tend to be a little more informal about it, right? A simpler approach. So for the simpler approach, all you need, again, is a growth mindset, curiosity, and some way of tracking the results. And it's just, what is the question that you want to answer? Like, what is the thing you're trying to figure out? Sorry, I'm trying to fix one thing. Oh, let me do it while I'm in. Okay. So it's studying the system. And I think a big part of this might be there's something that's in the back of your head. When you look at your board or you think about your work, there's something you're thinking, if I did this, maybe if I tried this, maybe this would improve things. Maybe they would get better. But you don't do it for whatever reason. And that's really the thing. Like, are you brave enough? Are you willing to just give it a shot?
Do it!
There you go. Can you hear that?
Just do it!
That video is like 7 minutes long. But it is, I watch it like once a week just because it's ridiculous and really a great motivator. What I would encourage you to do is to try to run some kind of experiment in the next week. Think of something you're trying to figure out. How can you test it? How can you measure it? And even if you don't know what it's going to tell you, I mean, maybe try eating different things for breakfast. For me, like, I've found there's certain things I can eat that will keep me energized till lunch. Other things make me want to take a nap around 11 o'clock. Maybe it's when you go to bed. Any habit that you have, try making minor adjustments to it and see how it affects your ability to perform in your work, in your personal life, all that. So that's, I'll be ready for questions in a second. I'm teaching a course with Mark Kilby, if you know him from the Distributed Teams book, on how to do all this stuff and how to build a productivity survival kit. Think of it like disaster recovery for your own productivity system. That's what we're going to be focusing on. It's super cheap right now if you use that discount code. There's the book that Stuart and I have. If you want to check that out, right now it's available on LeanPub. We will have print versions available on Amazon shortly. And I am now ready for questions.